And thanks for staying with us here at 7:30. They are the numbers we call, the numbers we rely on in our urgent moments of need. 911. In Charlotte, if you dial those digits for a medical reason, help comes immediately in one of two forms: an ambulance from Medic or a fire truck from Charlotte Fire. It's why a dispute between the two is worth watching. The contract between Medic and Charlotte Fire that governs who covers what expires at the end of this week. And the two organizations have been butting heads over the details for quite some time.
We had dozens of documented cases where fire crews were on scene waiting for upwards of 45, 60, and in some cases 75 minutes for an ambulance to get here.
That was the secretary of the local firefighter union talking to our investigative reporter David Hodges way back in 2021. There had been a change in response protocols when it came to calls that weren't life-threatening, an illness, a minor car crash, etc. Charlotte Fire would respond with lights and sirens. They were called Sierra calls. It was a new category. Medic would get 30 minutes then to show up. The ambulance services deputy director explained it this way.
It's our responsibility to determine if they need a very rapid response or if they need someone to show up at their house and help them navigate the healthcare system. And the Sierra protocol allows us to take time, understand people's needs, and respond to their needs appropriately and help them navigate the system.
But as you heard a moment ago, Charlotte Fire was saying Medic was too often not getting on scene in the required 30 minutes, leaving firefighters stuck on those scenes just waiting. So fast forward now 3+ years. Charlotte Fire says the issues have not been fully resolved here. As the city has grown, so has the call volume. And the fire department adds it's not being reimbursed properly for all the work it's doing. That's why they want a new deal, a new contract. Again, the current one expires this Thursday. Charlotte Fire in a statement said once the agreement expires on January 9th, Charlotte Fire will no longer be legally authorized to respond to such calls. As the agency responsible for emergency medical services, Medic will need to determine how EMS calls are addressed after the contract ends. Medic says it is working with Charlotte Fire to extend negotiations for another 6 months. In a statement, Medic says we have every confidence that we will be able to come to an agreement as soon as possible without any service interruptions for our community, which is our shared priority. But tonight, still no deal in place. Now, earlier today, we spoke to Charlotte City Council member Victoria Watlington. She is the chair of the council's Housing, Safety, and Community Committee.
Councilwoman, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. I think the most basic question is probably for your constituents, if they call 911 on Friday, is someone going to be there to answer that call quickly?
Yes. So absolutely, understandably, the question at the forefront of people's mind is somebody going to be there when I call? And yes, right now we are working with the fire chief and with the county to make sure that we've got a temporary MOU in place so that there'll be no service interruptions.
So you're confident that'll be in place by Friday?
I've recently spoke with the fire chief, and that's been the last update that I've gotten, that they were active in negotiations and they believed that they were at a point where it was just time to get something inked on a temporary MOU.
Well, as you know, this has been dragging on for quite some time now, really several years. What's the biggest hurdle to overcome?
The biggest hurdle to overcome, as I understand it from the chief, is just making sure that they're responsive and active in the communications. As I understand it, there had been some conversations, as you mentioned, earlier last year, and that communication essentially fell flat. And so once the conversation was picked back up and they really started working through issue by issue, they were starting to see much more smooth and much more quick progress. So we hope to keep that momentum up through a permanent order.
Is some of this about money, though? Does the city want something more from the county, which largely funds Medic here?
We are still looking at that. We as a council have not seen the specifics of the budget, but what we're hearing from our fire department is that there is an opportunity to reset the agreement and reset the pay scale to make sure that what we are providing in terms of resourcing is sufficiently covered through the budget.
Yeah, how important is it to not just kick this down the road for 6 more months, but to actually come up with a long-term solution to all this?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And those are questions that I have for the chief that I'm waiting on response for specifically. Tell me what it is that we can figure out on a temporary basis that changes when we start to think long term. And so I'm awaiting that information back as they finalize this temporary order to really see what's still hanging out there. But you're absolutely right. We've got to figure out how do we make sure that long term we're doing what makes sense and we're doing it early.
We will keep you updated. Again, that deadline coming up this week. All right, Ron, your